Performance and results don't always align in Formula 1. That's why at the race, we create our own ranking of the drivers based on being trackside and in the paddock for every single race, qualifying session and free practice. Our judgement is based exclusively on how each driver performed during 2024, taking into account the quality of their machinery. This isn't about ranking the drivers in order of how good they are, but purely what they showed during the 24 event season. We consider all manner of criteria: qualifying speed, stint speed, errors, execution, consistency, their all-round contribution to the teams, and much more. And this is not the opinion of any one individual, but instead drawn from our team of F1 experts. Let us know what you think of our order and reasoning in the comments. 24. Jack Doohan. We said we'd rank every driver, so poor old Jack Doohan must take last place simply because he had no opportunity to climb higher. His one outing for Alpine was perfectly respectable and a solid foundation for his rookie season in 2025. 23rd, Logan Sargent. Logan Sargent failed to make the step Williams required in his second season. He paid the price for that, and his many crashes, by losing his drive after another accident at Zandvoort. Yes, he was often lumbered with old spec parts, but that was partly down to his damage streak and the lack of performance. And after Alex Albon damaged his monocoque in Australia, Sargent's confidence took a hit when he had to give his car to his teammate. But the big problem was he was unable to turn flashes of speed into anything consistent. 22nd, Zhou Guanyu. Zhou's mini revival in the final triple header, qualifying well and grabbing Sauber's only points with a superb drive to 8th in Qatar, proved what he's capable of in F1. But much of his season was a nightmare. The team played a large part in that. There were only a handful of events where he had the same car spec as teammate Valtteri Bottas, and there were so many problems, some of them not talked about publicly by the team, that partly explain his poor results. However, he also struggled with a lack of confidence in the car on corner entry, and he only escaped Q1 4 times. 21st, Lance Stroll. Aston Martin's struggles made life difficult for him, but this was probably Stroll's least impressive season of his 8 in F1. He scored points only 6 times, and while there were 5 occasions where he qualified or finished ahead of Alonso, he was usually slower than his teammate, by an adjusted average of almost a quarter of a second. Stroll also seemed to lose interest as the car dropped off, failing to score a point in the final 11 events. There were also stupid errors such as rear-ending Daniel Ricciardo before the safety car restart in China and going off on the formation lap at Interlagos, then carelessly driving into the gravel. 20th, Sergio Perez. Based on the first quarter of the season, Perez would be ranked far higher on this list, but as Red Bull's performance advantage vanished, so his level plummeted alarmingly. In the first 6 events, he banked 103 points. In the remaining 18, he scored a feeble 49 and became increasingly lost. There was hope a new deal in June would restore Perez's confidence by settling his mind, but as team principal Christian Horner admitted, that didn't work. Even at its worst, the Red Bull was a point-scoring car, and Perez's performance cost it the Constructors' Championship. 19th, Franco Colapinto. Colapinto's high points prove he justifies a full-time seat in the future, and his early outings were particularly impressive. Points finishes in Azerbaijan and the United States, backed up by near misses in Italy and Singapore in his first 4 races, justified Williams' decision to promote him. He's ranked this low because the crashes, 2 in Brazil and in qualifying in Las Vegas, were so costly to the team, and he only had 9 weekends to make an impression. He was about 2/10 off Albon in terms of single lap pace when you take into account the many factors that distorted the picture, a good performance in the circumstances. However, his attitude and mindset were laudable, and the big impression he's made means he probably won't be on the F1 sidelines for long. 18th, Daniel Ricciardo. Ricciardo's season started terribly and he was lost in the early races, but there was an uptick in form from the 9th race of the season in Canada. While the consistency was never rock solid, Ricciardo had strong weekends in Austria, Hungary and Belgium and was close to getting a Red Bull promotion in the August break. His positions in the race's post-race rankings before the break show his performances significantly improved in that phase. That promotion didn't happen, and his form after the break dropped off, resulting in him being unceremoniously axed after the Singapore Grand Prix, even though, on average, he was only just over a 10th off teammate Yuki Tsunoda on qualifying pace. 17th, Liam Lawson. Ricciardo's replacement at RB was Liam Lawson. He immediately justified his place with a strong seasonal debut in Austin, setting the fastest RB lap of the weekend in Q1, then finishing 10th despite starting from the back thanks to a grid penalty. Lawson cited his successful comeback race as the highlight of his part season. He also scored with 7th place in the wet at Interlagos. But there were a few too many scrapes along the way, and his 2024 mini-campaign was good rather than great. 16th, Kevin Magnussen. Judged only by his strong late-season run, once the braking stability of the Haas improved enough to give him the confidence he needs, Magnussen would be ranked much higher. Unfortunately, he only had occasional flashes of teammate Nico Hülkenberg's performance in the first two-thirds of the season, his main contribution aggressive rearguard actions in service of the team. Late on, he produced some of his best work in F1, notably an outstanding Mexican Grand Prix weekend that netted 7th place. If this is, as it appears, the end of his F1 career, then he at least went out on a high. 15th, Ollie Bearman. Bearman's fragmented season of 3 isolated outings, 2 for Haas and 1 for Ferrari, means he can't realistically be ranked any higher, but he made a big impact. His Saudi Arabia 7th place, having been thrown into action on Saturday in place of the unwell Carlos Sainz, was an incredible start. He followed that up with a point in Azerbaijan and then an Interlagos weekend where he was faster than teammate Hülkenberg, but ultimately had too many off-track moments in the wet race. Of the 3 drivers who joined mid-season, Bearman made the biggest impact and showed he potentially has a very bright F1 future. 14th, Esteban Ocon. Although Ocon's season ended with a run of events during which he griped about the car, contributing to his early Alpine exit, he had his strong moments during 2024. While his second place in the wet at Interlagos stood out, he put in some good performances in losing causes in the first half of the season, picking up points in Miami, Canada and Spain, on top of taking an impressive 9th at Spa. But in the second half of the season, teammate Pierre Gasly outclassed him in dry conditions and Ocon was convinced he had car problems that the team couldn't detect. There were also flashpoints such as Monaco, where his lunge on Gasly at Portier, having been instructed not to fight the sister car on the first lap, led to a threat he would be benched. It was a sad end to his Alpine career, one in which his class only sporadically shone through. 13th, Valtteri Bottas. For the only time in his F1 career, Bottas finished the season pointless, but it wasn't for a lack of speed or effort. He would have scored points early on, but for a combination of pit stop troubles and an engine problem in China. But for much of the season, he was restricted to occasional Q2 appearances and battling races in the lower order. The fact he escaped Q1 10 times shows the qualifying speed is still there. But if this is the end for his racing career in F1, he goes out with his head held far higher than the championship table suggests. 12th, Alex Albon. Albon couldn't repeat his heroics of 2023 in a Williams that was a better all-round car, but lacked the peakiness of previous years. He spent much of his season toiling outside the points. Albon scored 4 times, peaking with 7th in Azerbaijan, but there were too many untidy weekends where things weren't maximised. Australia exemplified that, where a heavy crash on Friday reduced Williams to 1 car. At his best, Albon was fast and led the team well, but he couldn't quite drag the consistency of performance needed to make it a threat to do better than 9th in the championship. 11th, Yuki Tsunoda. This was Tsunoda's best season so far in F1, one in which his consistency improved and he saw off the challenge of another teammate in Daniel Ricciardo and outperformed Liam Lawson late on. It was only during the middle stages, when RB lost its way and he became less consistent, that he lost out on a likely place in our top 10. But there were so many strong weekends, Australia, Japan, Miami, Monaco and Brazil among them. By his own admission, Tsunoda needed to work on his emotional control and communication style, and he has made big gains, with only a couple of moments when the red mist set in. Tsunoda was the second most impressive driver in the Red Bull F1 stable this season. 10th, Nico Hülkenberg. Hülkenberg was the linchpin of Haas's unexpectedly strong 2024, including sprints. He scored points 13 times and bagged 70% of the team's total. There were a few mistakes, notably tagging the wall in Baku and an off in Brazil. He also had a spell when he struggled for rhythm in the car in the second half of the year. But for the most part, Hülkenberg was Haas's Mr. Reliable, peppering his consistently good performances with the occasional head-turning moment, such as setting 4th fastest time in qualifying in Abu Dhabi. That he finished 11th a remarkable 7 times shows how reliable a threat he was in the midfield. 9th, Lewis Hamilton. It might seem harsh to place a driver who won twice only 9th, but Hamilton's season was erratic and he too often made life difficult for himself with poor qualifying performances. For the first time in his F1 career, he was comprehensively outperformed by a teammate in qualifying, with George Russell on average 0.170 seconds quicker. But for all that, Hamilton was often outstanding in races, showing all his old tyre management skills and racecraft. And at Silverstone, he ended a long win drought with one of the most memorable victories of his career. 8th, Pierre Gasly. Gasly's was a season of two halves. It's just the good half was actually only the final quarter of the campaign, once Alpine introduced a major upgrade package in Austin. That led to an impressive run of results for Gasly, who was only denied even more points in this run by a strategic error in Austin and an engine failure after qualifying a brilliant third in Las Vegas. Third in the wet at Interlagos was the high point of that run, after starting down in 13th after bad luck in qualifying, as Gasly did most of the heavy lifting in Alpine's surprise rise to 6th. But he also produced some great performances when the car was poor, although teammate Esteban Ocon did have the edge at times very early in the season. Gasly was also delighted by the fact he achieved his personal target of not causing any car damage through his own accidents, although he did clash with Ocon at the start in Suzuka and picked up some floor damage. 7th, Oscar Piastri. Piastri broke through as a Grand Prix winner with victory in Hungary and pulled off a brilliant pass on Charles Leclerc to take a second win in Baku. He also ambushed teammate Lando Norris for the lead on the first lap at Monza, laying down a marker. There was much that was good about Piastri's season, as he made a significant contribution to McLaren's Constructors' Championship victory, scoring 44% of its points. However, even taking into account it's Piastri's second season, he didn't make the inroads into Norris that it appeared he might. On average, he was 0.129 seconds slower in qualifying, and there were few occasions when he unequivocally outpaced and outraced his teammates, with his tame run after the Baku win disappointing. But he was always reliable and completed every lap of the season. There's more to come for Piastri, and he proved he can be a threat to Norris, but it didn't happen enough in 2024. 6th, Fernando Alonso. Alonso slated F1's power rankings that feature on the official Formula 1 website at the end of a season in which he finished outside the top 10. But don't worry, Fernando, we thought you did a great job. Fernando fell well short of the heights of 2023 when he was a podium regular, but that's down to the shortcomings of the Aston Martin AMR 24. This left him fighting a rearguard action for the whole season, as even when the car was capable of some startling qualifying performances early on, starting on the second row in Saudi Arabia and China, it regressed to its natural position in the race. And the Aston Martin got less competitive as developments made the car harder to drive. Yet Alonso still picked up regular good results. The list of impressive weekends is long. Bahrain, Japan, Canada, Belgium, Azerbaijan, Singapore and Abu Dhabi all stood out, even though he never finished higher than 5th. The main downside to the season was a patchy run in the second quarter of the year, in which only his 6th place in Canada really grabbed the attention. Overall, he got the most out of the package, comfortably outperformed teammate Lance Stroll, and saved Aston Martin more embarrassment. 5th, Carlos Sainz. Sainz's valedictory Ferrari season was probably the best of his 4 years with the team. His wins in Australia and Mexico stood out, as did an impressive run in the first part of the campaign. That was supported by a consistent body of work, only let down by the occasional bad weekend, notably crashes in Canada, Azerbaijan and Brazil, twice. And while he was second best of the Ferrari drivers, he had his strongest season relative to teammate Charles Leclerc in qualifying, based on our adjusted averages, just under 400ths down over the season. In doing so, he took Ferrari to within 14 points of the Constructors' Championship. He can consider himself desperately unlucky not to be staying at Ferrari, given that was a result of the unexpected availability of Lewis Hamilton. 4th, George Russell. George Russell achieved something unique in F1 history, comprehensively outperforming Lewis Hamilton in qualifying over a season in the same car. On average, he was 0.170 seconds quicker, a significant margin against the driver with the most pole positions in F1 history. He backed that up with plenty of good race performances, even if often it was difficult to untangle how well he was performing with the capricious swings of the Mercedes. His wins in Las Vegas and Belgium were brilliantly executed, while he lucked into a triumph in Austria thanks to being an excellent third when Verstappen and Norris clashed. He also cut down on the mistakes from the previous year, even though there were still a few too many incidents. The qualifying crash in Austin and Friday shunt in Mexico were particularly costly. But none of the 3 occasions he failed to score were down to his errors, provided you accept the steward's judgement that his late crash in Australia was down to Alonso's driving ahead. Fast, consistent and increasingly dependable, Russell showed he's now ready to lead Mercedes. 3rd, Lando Norris. Norris achieved many things in 2024, taking his first Grand Prix victory and adding 3 more, flirting with a title fight he never really made happen, and being the spearhead of McLaren's Constructors' Championship. As a driver, in terms of the pure technical skills of putting together great qualifying laps, managing race stints brilliantly, leading from the front, chasing well and recovering when down the order, he was excellent. The only asterisk against his season was the fact that when it came to wheel-to-wheel combat, he wasn't at the same level as Max Verstappen. There were races where he could have won, notably Austria, where Verstappen proved too tough an opponent, and to be a title winner, Norris still needs to make gains. He also threw away second place in Qatar by failing to spot yellow flags. But he did show late in the season that he's learning, notably in Mexico, where he outthought Verstappen and drew a ludicrous retaliatory lunge out of him. Norris missed too many chances in 2024, but it was nonetheless a formidable season. Second, Charles Leclerc. Leclerc was never a championship threat in 2024, yet finished just 18 points behind Norris. The highlights were obvious, winning at home in Monaco, in front of the Tifosi at Monza, and with a brilliant display in the United States Grand Prix. But that was supported by plenty of strong results, finishing in the top 4 18 times. The low points were barely worth speaking of. Austria was a disappointment caused largely by injudicious car positioning at the start, while Silverstone went wrong only thanks to sacrificing Friday to running the troublesome new floor spec and a terrible strategy call. Other than those 2 weekends, the only other occasion he didn't score was in Canada, a weekend ruined by car problems. He was ahead of teammate Sainz the majority of the time, although faced a tougher challenge than in previous seasons in qualifying. But what really made an impression was how consistent Leclerc was and his lack of mistakes. This campaign proved beyond doubt that if he gets in a championship challenging car, he's ready to win it. First, Max Verstappen. Could any driver other than Verstappen have stayed clear in the Drivers' Championship fight given Red Bull's struggles after early dominance? Probably not. Particularly vital were his wins in the Emilia-Romagna, Spanish and Canadian Grand Prix at the start of Red Bull's slide that extended his points lead. He then scored consistently after that, before a late season rally with 2 wins in the final 4 races, including a stunning wet weather victory at Interlagos, gave him victory by a healthy 63 points. In the races after McLaren's great step forward in Miami, Verstappen outscored Norris by 10 points. There were mistakes along the way, more so than last year, but that's inevitable given he was only afforded the chance to be out front on his own in the early races, and when in the thick of the fight, he more often than not thrived. This wasn't Verstappen's most dominant title win or the most dramatic, but you can make a case it was his best, given he did the near impossible and overcame the competitive gravity that should have dragged him into a closer title battle.